Okay, good morning everyone. I'm Sameer Malkani, co-founder of the FBAI, and with me here today I'd like to introduce Mr. Robin Coupar, who is the global brand ambassador for Gruppo Campari. Robin, welcome to India.
Thank you very much, Sameer.
This is your first visit to India.
Yes, it is. My first visit, and hopefully not the last visit. I hope to come back.
Absolutely. Robin has been here for over a week, touring Gurgaon and then Pune, followed by Bombay.
Yes.
How was the experience in Gurgaon and Pune?
Well, everywhere goes. This is such a fascinating country. I mean, there's so much to see. There's so many things that blow my mind. I mean, it's what a vibrant and colourful place, and I just love being here. It's an incredible experience.
You're here on behalf of Asprey Spirits to launch the Glen 10-year and 18-year-old in India, which is absolutely fantastic. What do you see as single malts in India? Primarily has been a blended Scotch and a whiskey drinking country.
Yes.
Over the past 5 years, it's evolved, and a lot of people are taking to single malt. Is that the reason why you decided to come here, or?
Yes, I mean, India's a big whiskey market, and it's volume-wise, it's absolutely
Probably the largest in the world.
Enormous,
Yes.
enormous, and Scotch whiskey has been very well established here in India.
Yes.
And at the low end, the sort of standard end, and the sort of premium deluxe blended end as well. And I think premium deluxe whiskey, like your Johnny Walker Black Labels, your Chivas Regals, 12 years old, are well established now. But what we're seeing is an emergence of what I describe as the gold standard,
Okay.
and that's single malt Scotch whiskey, which really epitomizes, handcrafted products that are made in small distilleries
Yes.
in Scotland, and this is coinciding with this incredible growth in the Indian economy, where I think consumers are beginning to understand that there is a next step up from blended Scotch whiskey, and India is very connected, and I think when people travel abroad, they're being exposed to the single malt category, particularly in duty-free stores, and so there's an interest in the category, and I think we're about 120,000 9-litre cases, which is a small base, but it's growing quite fast. So we are, as a company, very interested in the opportunity, and that's why we're launching, first of all, the 10 years old,
Yes.
which is our flagship expression of Glen, and I think in time we'll introduce the 18 years old into the market, although it will be available in the duty-free
Yes.
stores.
But in the retail, the 10 years old will be available
Yes, that's
initially.
correct.
Yes,
Yes.
lovely. Talking about Glen Grant in 1840, you had John and James Grant actually apply for a license, a distillery license in Speyside, and the journey's been, so good so far.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that journey, as well as about that Dennis Malcolm, who is the Glen Grant master distiller,
Yes.
who was actually born on the property. Over 5
He
decades, he's been with you all. So it's quite an amazing journey.
Yes, it is, and it's a journey that's we're now into the 176th year.
Yeah.
So you're correct. The distillery was established by two brothers, John and James Grant, who up to then were really operating under the radar.
Okay.
They were operating, illegally. They were what we call illicit distillers.
Mm-hmm.
They were smugglers, bootleggers,
Yes.
and then they decided to go legitimate and apply for their license in
Yes.
1840. So they started up the distillery,
Yes.
based in the small village of Rothes, which is right in the centre
Of
the
Speyside.
Speyside,
Yes.
on the banks of the River Spey, which is the main river that runs through the Speyside region. 1872, the distilleries handed over to the keys of the distillery, handed over to the son of John Grant, who's known as James Grant.
Grant. Yes.
So people knew him or referred to him as the Major,
Yes.
Major James Grant, and he really sort of put the pieces in place to create Glen Grant, the character and style that we know Glen Grant today. So it's a very soft, gentle,
Yeah.
I describe it as a very elegant style of malt
Absolutely,
whiskey.
absolutely.
I mean, some malt whiskies are smoky, some are very heavy, oily.
But
big
this
whiskey.
has a little bit of smoky flavor.
I wouldn't describe it as smoky flavour. Certainly up until the mid 1970s, we malted our own barley over a peat fire, like all distilleries
Yes.
do. Nowadays, Glen Grant doesn't really have that smoky. I mean, there may be a little whiff of smoke in some of the older Glen Grants that were, made prior to the 1970s, and you do come across some of those here and there.
Yes.
But moving on to the present day, I mean, our master distiller Dennis Malcolm, a very interesting gentleman for a couple of reasons. Well, first of all, he's the longest serving distiller in Scotland.
Absolutely.
And of course, experience counts for a lot in this industry.
Yes.
I mean, you simply can't, start a distillery and make good whiskey overnight.
Yes.
It takes time and experience, and fortunately we have that experience. Yes, Dennis was born at the distillery, and he started his career in 1961 at the age of 15. So
Wow.
people think, wow, 15 years old, that's quite young. But in those days, there wasn't, quite the same sort of restrictions in sort of responsible drinking as it were. But Dennis has kind of been very true to the legacy that Major James Grant left, and we've been making whiskey exactly the same way since the late 1800s.
And some exceptional whiskey. I think he's done a brilliant job throughout. In fact, you all have been featured in the Jim Murray's Whisky Bible consecutively for 5 years, which is amazing itself.
Yeah.
I think that's one thing which very few people have achieved, and your under 10-year-old has actually, you've been featured that in 2016 and 17.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you mentioned that, Samir,
Yeah.
because that's a very important point. Of course, Jim Murray is probably the most renowned
Revered,
whiskey writer
Yes.
in the world right now. I mean, there are a lot of there's a lot of attention in whiskey now, particularly now that whiskey's going through this kind of resurgence across the globe, not just here in India, but across the globe. Every year, Jim Murray publishes his Whisky Bible, which is close to about 10,000 whiskies
Yes.
across the world. I mean, it's, probably half of the book is dedicated to Scotch whiskey,
Yes.
and the rest is obviously whiskey from other countries. But in 2013, in the single malt category, 10 years and under, our Glen Grant was voted number one.
Yes.
And that was fantastic. I mean, can you imagine the competition?
I know.
Some of these big names, and but that continued, rolled into 2014, 15, 16, and then unbelievably, 5 years in a row.
5 years in a row.
The best single malt Scotch whiskey, 10 years old.
10 years old and under, which is an achievement by itself.
It is, yeah. I mean, I think it's testament to the quality
yes.
and consistency of the product.
Yes, absolutely. So great. We wish you all the best, and thank you for being with us today.
Thank you
and I'm sure Glen Grant will go places in India.
We hope
and
so.
we look forward to that.
Thank you.
Lovely to see you. Yeah.